25 granite boxes buried beneath the sands of Egypt. Each one weighs 100 tons. Each one cut with a precision that modern CNC machines struggle to match. No engineer alive can explain how they were made. In India, an iron column has been standing in the open air for 16 centuries, through monsoons, heat, and a cannonball strike, and it still shows almost no rust, while modern steel surrenders in years. In Iraq, workers digging a railway in 1936 pulled a clay jar out of the ground that turned out to be a working battery, assembled 2,000 years before Alessandro Volta invented his. These objects do not fit inside the textbooks, because the textbooks were written by people who never stood in front of them. Today we are going through 7 real ancient discoveries, each one documented, each one sitting in a museum you can visit tomorrow, and each one looking like it was left behind by travelers from a time we have not reached yet. Every single one of them forces the same question. What did our ancestors know that we have spent centuries trying to rediscover? Egypt, Saqqara, 1850. French archaeologist Auguste Mariette noticed a stone sphinx poking out of the sand northwest of the Pyramid of Djoser. When he excavated the area, he found an entire avenue of sphinxes leading to the entrance of an underground structure. His team had to use dynamite to break through. The passages had been sealed completely shut. Behind the stone walls opened a labyrinth of long tunnels carved directly into the limestone bedrock. And inside the largest gallery, lining both sides of the corridor, stood 25 enormous boxes made from black and rose granite. Each box is 4 meters long, 2.5 meters wide, and over 3 meters tall. The lid alone weighs 30 tons. The total weight of each container approaches 100 tons, the equivalent of a fully loaded freight train car, placed inside a tight underground niche. When Mariette cracked one open with explosives, he found nothing inside. No remains. No offerings, just smooth, empty walls. Official science calls this place the Serapeum and claims it was used to bury the sacred Apis bulls. The problem is that not a single one of the open boxes contained bull remains or any trace of mummification. What they did find was something far harder to explain. Engineer Christopher Dunn, with 49 years of experience in high-precision manufacturing, measured the interior surfaces of 2 of the boxes using an industrial gauge with a tolerance of 2/10,000ths of an inch. The walls were flat to a level achievable only with computer-controlled machinery. The corners were held at exactly 90 degrees, with an interior radius of just 4 millimeters. When Dunn contacted an American firm and asked them to replicate one of these boxes from a single piece of granite, they told him directly, even with an unlimited budget, they would have to assemble it from 6 separate slabs. The ancients carved each container from a single monolith, quarried in Aswan, 800 kilometers away. The tunnels are so narrow that 2 people can barely pass each other. There is no room for levers, no space for a construction crew, no explanation for how 100-ton blocks were turned at right angles and lowered into niches with a 40-centimeter clearance on each side. One unfinished box still sits in the middle of the tunnel, as if the builders put it down halfway through and walked away forever. Rough hieroglyphs scratched on the outer walls contrast sharply with the mirror-smooth polish of the interior, as if the inscriptions were added thousands of years later by completely different hands. In 1901, Greek sponge divers were caught in a storm near the island of Antiquity. The captain sent a diver down to the seafloor to make use of the time, and the diver surfaced in a panic, screaming about dead bodies 60 meters below. The captain went down himself and found not a graveyard but the wreck of an ancient Roman ship that had sunk around 65 BC. The dead bodies were marble statues that had been lying in the sand for 2,000 years. Among the sculptures and scattered coins lay an unremarkable piece of greenish bronze. For 2 years it sat in a storage box at the National Museum in Athens until a politician named Spiridon noticed a crack in the surface. Inside, a gear was visible, small, perfectly cut, inside an object more than 2,000 years old. The press called it a sensation. Skeptics called it a forgery. Then an X-ray tomograph in the early 2000s settled the argument permanently. Inside the device was a system of 37 bronze gears. The largest was 13 centimeters in diameter with 223 teeth. The device, roughly the size of a laptop, calculated the positions of the sun, the moon, and 5 planets. It predicted solar and lunar eclipses, tracked the cycles of the Olympic Games, and displayed the phases of the moon. European science did not reach that level of computational accuracy for another 1,500 years. The mechanism accounted for the fact that the moon accelerates and decelerates at different points along its elliptical orbit, and solved that problem using two gears mounted on an offset axis. That is a differential mechanism, the exact same engineering principle that allows the wheels of your car to spin at different speeds when turning a corner. The gear teeth are cut with a precision no hand file could achieve. Researchers from University College London called the original the work of a genius who combined Babylonian astronomy with the mathematics of Plato's Academy. Whoever built this device understood the cosmos at a level the rest of humanity would not reach for another 20 centuries. If this kind of history is what you want more of, subscribe now. We go where the textbooks stop. In the courtyard of the Quad al-Islam Mosque in Delhi stands an iron column 7 meters and 20 centimeters tall, weighing more than 6 tons. A Sanskrit inscription connects it to King Chandragupta II of the Gupta dynasty, 4th century AD. For 16 centuries, this column has stood in the open air, through monsoon rains, blazing heat, and the full force of Delhi's climate. And it shows almost no rust. Ordinary iron in Delhi's humidity develops a thick crust of corrosion within a few years. The Eiffel Tower is repainted every 7 years just to stop it from deteriorating. In the 10th century, a cannonball struck the column directly, and it survived, leaving only a dent at 4 meters height. Scientists have been trying to solve this mystery since 1912, when British chemists first took samples. The answer came 91 years later, when Professor Balasubramaniam of the Indian Institute of Technology in Kanpur published his findings. His team used X-ray diffraction, electrochemical testing, and microscopy to finally understand what was happening on the surface of the metal. The iron in the column contains approximately 1% phosphorus and almost no sulfur or manganese. That specific composition triggers the formation of a crystalline layer of iron hydrogen phosphate just 1/20th of a millimeter thick. That layer acts as an invisible shield, and it self-repairs with every cycle of wetting and drying. The ancient smiths had essentially created a natural analog of stainless steel 15 centuries before stainless steel was invented. They did it through forge welding, heating and hammering the iron in a way that preserved the phosphorus content without instruments, without chemistry textbooks, without any of the tools we would consider necessary. Modern metallurgy has still not fully reproduced the exact combination of composition and durability found in this column. 6 tons of iron, not a single gram of paint, standing in the open air and winning a battle that our entire industrial civilization keeps losing. In the British Museum behind armored glass stands the Lycurgus cup, the only complete example of dichroic glass from antiquity. When light falls on it from the front, the cup is green, like jade. When light passes through the walls from behind, it ignites into ruby red. The surface is carved with a scene from mythology. King Lycurgus tangled in grapevines while the god Dionysus watches his destruction. The carving itself is extraordinary, executed in a technique called cage cup, where glass is cast as a thick block and then cut down to an openwork lattice. But the color-changing trick has nothing to do with the carving. It is hidden inside the structure of the glass itself. The answer came in the 1990s, when fragments of similar Roman glass were examined under an electron microscope. Inside the glass were particles of a gold-silver alloy approximately 50 nanometers in size, 1,000 times smaller than a grain of salt. When light hits those particles, the metal electrons begin to oscillate and shift wavelength. Silver produces the green color in reflection. Gold produces the red in transmission. This effect is called plasmon resonance, and today it is used in medical sensors and holographic technologies. Roman craftsmen ground gold and silver down to particles invisible to the naked eye and fused them into glass at a ratio of 70 parts per million. Researchers at Cambridge University only managed to reproduce a similar effect in 2014 by creating arrays of 16 million nanoparticles per millimeter. The Romans achieved the same result 16 centuries earlier, without microscopes, without lasers, without any textbook on optics. The secret of production died with the empire. The Lycurgus cup is the only complete surviving witness. Today, researchers are attempting to use this ancient principle to build ultrasensitive water contamination detectors. A technology born for a banquet table may save millions of lives 17 centuries after it was first created. In 1936, workers laying a railway near Baghdad uncovered an ancient burial site not far from the ruins of Ctesiphon, the capital of the Parthian Empire. Among the objects found was a clay jar 14 centimeters tall with a copper cylinder inside. At the center of the cylinder hung an iron rod, not touching the walls, and the opening was sealed with a bitumen plug. Wilhelm Koenig, director of the National Museum of Iraq, immediately recognized the design, a galvanic cell. Two metals with different electrochemical potential, separated by space for a liquid electrolyte. Corrosion traces on the inner walls indicated the presence of an acid, most likely vinegar or grape juice. American scientist Willard Gray built an exact replica and filled it with grape juice. The device produced electric current. A single jar of this type can generate approximately 1 volt. Several connected together would produce enough current to electroplate jewelry with gold or silver. Similar vessels were found at a nearby Seleucid site, with bronze and iron needles lying alongside them. The Roman physician Scribonius Largus, writing in the 1st century AD, described treating gout by applying an electric ray fish to the patient's feet. The concept of using electricity for medical purposes was already familiar to the ancient world long before science gave it a name. The Baghdad battery predates Volta's official invention by at least 16 centuries. In 2003, it was stolen from the museum during the invasion of Iraq. Its current location is unknown. We may have lost the oldest electrical device in human history, and we cannot even run a modern analysis on it. If you are finding these discoveries as extraordinary as we do, hit the like button. It helps this content reach more people who deserve to know this history exists. Back to Egypt, but this time to an object that fits on a dining table and looks like a part pulled from a machine shop floor. In 1936, archaeologist Walter Emery opened the tomb of an official named Sabu in the Saqqara necropolis. Lying next to the skeleton was a broken stone disc, 61 centimeters in diameter. It is carved from metasiltstone, a brittle rock that splits and crumbles at the slightest careless strike. 3 curved lobes meet at a central hub, and viewed from above the disc is indistinguishable from the impeller of an industrial pump. The tomb dates to approximately 5,000 years ago, the First Dynasty, a period when tools were made from stone and soft copper. How someone carved thin, curved lobes from a rock that fractures when you look at it wrong, without leaving a single chip or crack, nobody can explain. An engineer 3D printed an exact replica and mounted it in a housing with a shaft. The copy immediately began pumping water powerfully, functioning as a classic centrifugal impeller. Without the housing, the spinning disc created a stable water vortex of such force that the shape being accidental is simply not possible. Engineers at Airbus printed their own copies and confirmed the aerodynamic properties, though the disc cannot function as a propeller in air. Egyptologist Cyril Aldred noted that the form of the disc suggests it is a copy of a much older metal original. If the Sabu disc is truly a model of a lost mechanism, we are looking at a trace of engineering knowledge that vanished before recorded history even began. 5,000 years ago, someone in the Nile Valley knew how to move water using centrifugal force. And then that knowledge dissolved into the sand, along with the name of whoever first thought of it. The final discovery does not hide underground. It stands in front of thousands of tourists every single day near the Chinese city of Xi'an. In 1974, farmers digging a well struck fragments of a clay figure. That was the beginning of the discovery of the Terracotta Army. More than 8,000 full-size warriors made from fired clay. Every figure stands at human height. Not one face is repeated, yet the builders used only 8 basic head molds as their starting point. They were guarding the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of unified China, whose mausoleum required 700,000 workers to construct. Less than 1% of the complex has been excavated. But the real sensation was not the statues. It was their weapons. More than 40,000 bronze arrowheads, swords up to 95 centimeters long, spears, and crossbow mechanisms were pulled from the pits. After 2,200 years underground, the blades were still sharp, still gleaming. For 40 years, scientists believed the secret was a chromium coating found on the bronze. a treatment that was not patented in Europe until the 20th century. Then a joint study by University College London and the Terracotta Army Museum in 2019 overturned the theory completely. The chromium on the swords turned out to be contamination from the lacquer used on the wooden handles and bamboo shafts. It had nothing to do with preserving the bronze itself. The real secret was the tin content of the alloy and the properties of the local soil. The alkaline loess of the region, fine-grained, low in organic material, created a perfect preservation environment. Bronze replicas buried in local soil remained untouched after 4 months of extreme testing. The same samples buried in British soil were heavily corroded in the same period. The craftsmen of the Qin dynasty, 22 centuries ago, selected an alloy and a burial environment that functioned as a perfect natural preservative. They did not know the words electrochemistry or alkaline corrosion. But the result of their work outlasted every empire that came after them. 40,000 blades lying in the dark, waiting, like an order nobody ever canceled. 7 objects, 7 civilizations, 7 moments where human knowledge reached something we are still struggling to explain. And we want to be honest with you about which one stopped us cold when we first researched it. Not the granite boxes, as impossible as they are. Not the Antikythera mechanism, as extraordinary as its gears are. The one that genuinely unsettled us was the Baghdad battery. Because if it functioned the way the replica proved it could, it means someone in the ancient world understood the principle of electricity. Not as a curiosity, not by accident, as a technology with practical applications for metalworking, possibly for medicine. And that device is now gone. Stolen in 2003, location unknown. We lost it before we could run a single modern analysis on it. The oldest electrical device in history, and we cannot even study it properly. That is not just a mystery, that is a loss. Which one of these 7 discoveries hit you the hardest? Leave your answer in the comments, and tell us why. We read every single one. If this channel is showing you history that school never did, hit the like button. Takes 1 second and it helps us keep going deeper. We walked through the underground tunnels of Saqqara and dove to the floor of the Mediterranean. We stood next to an iron column that outlasts everything our industry produces and looked inside a Roman cup where gold and silver dance at the nanoscale. We held a battery 2 millennia old and turned a stone turbine 5,000 years older than the combustion engine. Every single one of these objects is real, documented, sitting in a museum you can fly to tomorrow. None of them require aliens to explain, but every single one of them requires us to accept one uncomfortable fact. Our ancestors held knowledge that we have spent centuries slowly rediscovering. What we call breakthroughs, they may have called craft. What we call cutting edge, they may have called ordinary. Progress is not a straight line from ignorance to understanding. It is a spiral, and every civilization that reaches a peak takes knowledge with it when it falls. The recipe for Roman concrete was lost when the empire collapsed and has not been fully recovered to this day. The Minoan hydraulic system vanished when a volcano erased their world. The Nabatean waterproof plaster ended when the trade routes shifted and Petra emptied. The Baghdad battery was stolen before anyone could finish studying it. We do not know what we will lose tomorrow. We do not know how many centuries it will take to rediscover it. But one thing is certain. Anyone who laughs at primitive ancestors has never stood inside the Serapeum and tried to explain how a 100-ton granite box was lowered into a tunnel too narrow to turn around in. The real mystery is not how they built these things. The real mystery is why we keep forgetting that they did.